Welcome to Sputnik, orbiting the world with me, George Galloway.
And me, Gayatri.
The president has gone. Long live the president.
At least the ruling ANC hopes it will be so smooth. Others are not so sure.
I worked for the ANC for many years, here in Britain and even underground in apartheid South Africa. I profoundly hope this changing of the guard in South Africa is achieved peacefully and works out for the better. When I knew the new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, he was the leader of the National Union of Mineworkers, a militant in the ANC, a freedom fighter.
Now, Ramaphosa is a multi-millionaire, like many other former freedom fighters in South Africa, including the one who has just been overthrown, Jacob Zuma. Some of this wealth has been acquired by outright corruption. Some of the people who are crying foul over Zuma live in very glass houses.
But my old comrade Cyril has come to power on an anti-corruption platform, so people will be looking for results, not least the EFF, the economic freedom fighters, who are running against the ANC from their left and are now the third party in the state. Joining us to discuss South Africa today is Professor Brilliant Mhlanga, a Desmond Tutu Fellow at the University of Hertfordshire. Professor, welcome to the show. Let's start with what's just happened before we go into why it happened. On the face of it, ANC democracy is working like clockwork. The party takes a decision to recall the President of the Republic. He's gone, and the leader of the party is now in power as president. That's impressive, no?
That's quite impressive, but that's also what happens when these liberation movements, that also had the military wing, like ANC had its military wing, which was Umkhonto weSizwe, and Jacob Zuma himself, as you are aware, was one of the freedom fighters, actually, and he, in fact, is one of those who were the militants, the combatants. Now, they were used to taking orders. Now, that's what happens when organizations like those, liberation movements, actually transmutate into civilian parties that are actually now in power and still wanting to maintain also the militant aspect that they used to have, where they actually have orders being issued to cadres and cadres having to take orders. So in a way, we could see that as a kind of democracy, yes, but also we have to acknowledge that it also masks that military language, the military discipline, that's still behind and is part of the history of the ANC. So let's understand it that way as well.
Were you surprised that Comrade Jacob Zuma didn't fight this, or did he just see the writing on the wall? And secondly, do you think there's an element of unfairness, as he clearly does?
First, I wasn't surprised that actually he responded the way he responded. He's used to taking orders, as I have already said. It's not surprising because this is a person who has been a commander himself, has issued orders during the liberation struggle, and orders are, when they're issued by the leadership, he still takes them. So he still sees himself in that mold. And he did even say it himself, he said that. But then on the aspect of whether this is unfair or fair, I think it's very clear. It's totally unfair. Because as he even asked himself, what has he done? And this was not clearly articulated to him, except what we have been hearing in the news, corruption issues, and so many other issues related to the ANC as a whole, not necessarily this individual, because he wasn't actually leading alone. He was with a team. Yeah. So I think it's quite unfair in many ways. We need to understand it with that perspective. It's really a big issue.
Well, I believe he also has a background of, I believe, no less than 8 votes of non-confidence.
Yes.
He survived 8 of them.
Yes, 9 lives.
So
like a cat.
9 lives.
exactly. So maybe is it the reverse of no surprise? Then this is the end of it. He has reached the end of it.
He's Zuma. One of the things he has always been a master chess player. It has to be acknowledged. He has a history during the liberation struggle when he was arrested, sent to Robben Island, where he spent 10 years in Robben Island. He actually introduced chess. So he was always known for being a chess player, a master chess player. Yeah, he has that history. He's one of the greatest strategists and tacticians. He knows when it's time to make the move and when it's time to just wait and strike. So he, I think, weighed all the odds. But again, there was this challenge, which was already emerging. The challenge was that it was beginning to be, whatever move he was going to take was going to be misconstrued as him being showing lack of discipline, when all these years as an ANC cadre, he has always shown that he's a disciplined cadre. So he was actually, people already talking about whether he's going to prove he's a disciplined cadre. So he had to agree to go. It wasn't really surprising that he did that. But genuinely speaking, it still remains unfair, because it is ANC which is
unfair
to
because it's the pot calling the kettle black, because it's people in glass houses throwing stones. Is that what you mean? Because there are plenty of corrupt people in the ANC.
It is unfair because it is the pot actually calling the kettle black. Yeah. And we must ask these questions. We know that 3/4 of them in the leadership, starting from the big man himself, Nelson Mandela, when they, for example, when Nelson Mandela came out of prison, he was a poor man. He didn't have the money, but he died a millionaire. We saw lots of the part of his estate that actually was distributed around. He was a millionaire. Where did he get that money? We know that he actually lived in opulence. Who was actually footing the bill? All those are questions that no one has been has asked. We are aware that a number of other cadres were also being funded by organizations like Oppenheimer, Rothschild. They were funding Oliver Tambo. They were funding all these cadres. Now, if someone is accusing Jacob Zuma of state capture, what's that which was being done by in terms of funding the leadership by organizations, captains of industry, which included Oppenheimer, Rothschild, and others? What do we call that? Isn't that state capture?
Well, I knew that this problem was emerging when I was invited to attend a South African Communist Party event in Sun City to raise funds for the party's election campaign. And at the fundraising dinner and donating significant amounts of money were a number of the top diamond and gold merchants at a Communist Party fundraiser. Now, you can't blame these capitalists. They were backing the rising horse, people who were going to take state power. But it obviously contained within it the seeds of what has subsequently happened. I know cadre, I'm not going to name them, who were, I mean, their backside was hanging out of their trousers when I knew them. They had weapons in their hands. They were freedom fighters. And now they are multi-millionaires. And yet the people still backs the ANC. Why is that?
It's the liberation ethos. People are still hooked into it. They are still in the mode of fighting against apartheid, because we also must understand the disparities are still very clear. When you are in South Africa, you see that the gap between the poor and the rich are very clear. And those, the gap of it is clearly defined along also racial lines. And it's clear, you see that. So that's why people still see the ANC as their party, their liberation movement. But then the problem is that those at the helm, the leadership, actually are captured. We talking about Cyril Ramaphosa, who also owns more than 20% shares at Lomnin mine, the same mine where those miners were actually butchered. And at the same time when those miners were being butchered, asking for just a pittance, he actually, it's the same month, the same period when he's actually seen bidding at an auction for a buffalo and his calf, a cow buffalo and his calf. He's bidding for 19.5 million for that. So you can see, he is a person who you can clearly see, charity begins at home. If he's that kind of a leader who's prepared to bid for 19.5 million just for a cow buffalo and its calf, when his employees are actually being butchered, what is he going to do for South Africa?
You could argue that Cyril has made his money and now he's going to dedicate his time to the Republic and to the ANC. Do you see any merit in that argument?
I don't see any merit in that argument. First, this is the man who actually is brought in from business to mainstream politics by Jacob Zuma. Barely a couple of years after he's been brought back, what does he do? He steps him on the back. This is basically what has happened. And even when you heard if you watched the interview Jacob Zuma had with SABC, he made it very clear that he was not resisting. He actually had a deal with him as to how they were going to have a transitional arrangement such that by the time, after 6 months, Jacob Zuma will then leave power for Cyril to take over. And Cyril agreed. This is what Jacob Zuma tells us. And what happens? He goes and turns around and comes back and says, no, we have to, people are saying you have to go. So this is a man who, you are right, is a skillful negotiator, but it's clear he's a capitalist. It's clear he's driven by white monopoly capital. That we can't resist. It remains a fact. It's clear that those actually control the purse were telling him when it's time for him to take over and when it's time for him to kick Zuma out. So I don't think really that argument you are raising would actually merit. And I don't think it really is found plausible with so many people in South Africa, particularly those who are aware of the situation. That's my last question.
We're running out of time. Will it succeed? Because, of course, treason never prospers, because if it prospers, none dare call it treason. Will it succeed? Will the ANC pull through? Will they win the elections? Will they beat off the challenge to their left as a result of this manoeuvre?
Will ANC win? Yes, ANC will continue to win. It's still very popular. It's the liberation winning movement, and the masses are still in that liberation mode. It's easy for ANC to psych them, to say the white man wants to come back, and then everyone is in that mode, anti-apartheid mode. Is going to win. Will Cyril succeed? Let's leave it to time. But one thing we know, he's going to have a torrid time. He already is in the radar. EFF is already watching him. We know that he's going to be in serious trouble, but he has the captains of industry pulling the purse, ensuring that the South African rand doesn't catch a cold, so he might succeed. Because if everyone is happy and the economy is actually functional, he may be seen as a leader who actually is bringing them good fortune. So he might succeed on that note. But it will not be him succeeding. It will be big business, big capital succeeding in capturing him, because they captured him long time ago. So that's the point.
Professor, that was brilliant. Thank you very much indeed.
Coming up is Bristol Rovers President Wael Al-Qadi. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Sputnik. Back in 1883, when Bristol Rovers, the grand old English football club, were founded, their nickname was the Black Arabs. How appropriate, then, that their current owner and president is a Jordanian Arab. There are other Arab owners and institutions in the world of football, of course. Manchester City is owned by the UAE. The Emirates logo is everywhere. Qatar owns PSG and sponsors Barcelona. But Bristol Rovers are the only club owned by a Jordanian family. Let's meet the president of Bristol Rovers, Wael Al-Qadi. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Well, where did this nickname come from back in 1883, the Black Arabs?
The club were founded in Bristol, and they played at the rugby ground of a team called the Black Arabs. So they were known as the Black Arabs for
So there was a rugby team called Black Arabs prior to that. How did they get their name?
That I don't know. Yeah. I'm not a rugby guy.
Well, Bristol is of course, a great melting pot of a city for good and ill. I mean, there's a great deal of slave trading going on there, as there was in Liverpool and Glasgow and other parts of Britain. So it's always been a cosmopolitan hub, even if some of them didn't actually want to be there. The Pirates, though, sends a different message. Your nickname changed from the Black Arabs to the Pirates. Why?
Well, I mean, because of Bristol, you know, it's a maritime city. So Blackbeard was a famous character from Bristol. So I guess the Pirates became, you know, associated as the nickname. But nowadays, we're also known as the Gas.
Yes, because you're next to the gasworks.
Yes, we used to play at Eastville, and there was some gasworks near the stadium. So there's always like the smell of gas around, and the local rivals would refer to our fans as gas heads.
Bristol Rovers fan base is more working class, more white, more blue collar than Bristol City's. The richer people in North Somerset support Bristol City, and of course a lot of the students do. How have they taken, well, I've answered my own question, how have they taken to having a Jordanian owner?
Well, I mean, I hope they are happy with our ownership. I mean, for me, I consider myself as a fan, and I treat, you know, people around the club as a fan. And I like to go, you know, watch games away with them and stand with them, and you know, just go to the pubs before and after, and just mingle with them as a fan. So,
well, that explains your popularity, because I can assure you not many football owners do that. So how did you get into football?
Well, since I was young, I was a very passionate fan or follower of football. I used to play, used to watch a lot of football, English football too. Grew up watching Chelsea when they were in the second division. And then later on, I got involved with my federation in Jordan, working for the federation, and created a good network through UEFA and FIFA, which led us to owning a football club. So, you know, exciting journey.
So you woke up one day and thought, I'm going to buy Bristol Rovers?
No, one day. It was a long process. It was over like 3 years.
Okay.
It was studying where was the appropriate opportunity to get into this industry. And I realized we scoured Europe before realizing that the obvious choice would be in the UK, because the industry is very well established here in the UK. I'm talking the football industry, and your investment is protected by long-standing and proper laws. So as soon as that was determined, the search began for the club, and obviously it wasn't going to be the Premier League or Championship, because the value was astronomical, and I wanted a club which had a proper fan base, which was fundamentally strong in footballing terms, and which was from a very good city. It was well supported, but wasn't doing well at the time. And the opportunity came up at Rovers, and here we are.
It has actually got a tremendous potential fan base.
Yes, the potential is huge for this club, and this is what it's all about, trying to fulfill this potential.
And you've taken them up one league, and you just might get into the playoffs to get into the Championship.
Well, I mean, it's about producing on the field and creating a team that can compete year in, year out. And of course, you know, we want success, so hopefully, so far it's been good.
Now, in this journey of football, your affiliation to football, I believe you've also been an executive board member of the FIFA's under-17 women's football club.
We hosted the FIFA under-17 women's World Cup in Jordan, and I was part of the local organizing committee under the leadership of Prince Ali.
Was it the first time for Jordan to do such a thing? Was it
Yes,
the first time
it
for
was
Jordanian women's football club?
It was the first time FIFA hosted a Women's World Cup in the Middle East, and we hosted it in Jordan, and it was a complete success.
It's amazing.
Any resistance from the reactionaries who think that women should be locked up and not allowed to drive cars and so on?
No, that was very...
I know Jordan's not that kind of a country.
Exactly, I mean...
but I meant from some of your neighbours.
No, it was fantastic to see because the stadium, the final and a lot of games were well attended. Really? It was, and all walks of life came. It was just fantastic to see. Given the opportunity, this is...
Now, you're famously a Chelsea supporter who now owns Bristol Rovers. What are you going to do if they're drawn against each other in the Cup?
Well, we were drawn against each other last year in the Cup,
the
League Cup, yeah. So we played them away, and we narrowly lost 3-2, so...
Well, that's tremendous.
Yeah.
If only you could have got them back to Bristol for a replay.
They were lucky, so we were, if there was a couple of more minutes, we would have equalised and won, but
that is,
it wasn't meant
that
to
is
be.
fascinating. Now, the World Cup's coming up in Russia. I don't know if you're going to take in any of the games.
Yes, I've been to 5 World Cups, and Russia will be my 6th. So.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah.
Oh, you could take us with you. We only work for RT. We don't get tickets. But the one after that is in Qatar. Very controversial issues involved in the Gulf. There's an economic blockade embargo on Qatar by some of its neighbours. Some people say it's going to be too warm there. What's your view on that? Can Qatar host the World Cup after this?
Well, as a footballing fan, I mean, there's an opportunity there to go and watch 3 games in a day because it's all going to be held in Doha, the city of Doha. So if you go there, you can actually watch the 3 games, watch the first one, drive, go to the next stadium, watch the second one and the third one. So it's a bit different than what we've been used to, but it is what it is. Let's
Are they going to
embrace it.
air condition the stadia or
Well,
what?
it's been moved to November, and the final, I think, is on December 23rd or 22nd.
Okay.
So the weather is going to be
That's not
ideal.
going to be
it's not going to be
an
an
issue.
issue.
So finally, football is in fantastic health. The television deal for English football has just been done. Of course, maybe marginally down on the expectations, but far, far bigger, almost double what it started at. To what do you attribute the success of English football around the world? She's originally Indonesian. We've been to Indonesia, Malaysia, where people are actually queuing into the streets to watch in bars English football
matches. At night time.
At night time. In fact, the early hours of the morning. To what do you attribute that? What's the X factor? What's the reason why the English Premiership has so grabbed international attendance?
Well, because of the product, the Premier League product. It attracts all the top talent in the world. You have the best players here. You have the best managers working in the Premier League. So, that in itself attracts a lot of interest. You have all the stadiums always full. The atmosphere is fantastic at most Premier League games. So you're talking about the product of Premier League as a whole. It attracts a lot of people.
Well, it certainly attracts me. I have had to buy, of course, a Sky package, now a BT package. Thank God there's not a third package. I would have had to buy that too. But I'm now a Bristol Rovers supporter.
Oh, well,
thanks to you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having
on
me.
the Sputnik.
Thank you.
And now it's your turn to tell us what you think through the portals of social media. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, let's start with the Bristol Rovers, because Jonathan James Webb has an answer to the nicknames, the Arabs and
Black
Pirates.
Arabs and the
Black
Pirates,
Arabs,
yes.
exactly. He says, Pirates, because Bristol was the biggest port in the UK for many centuries, and I imagine because of this there were many Moors in Bristol.
Moors, for sure. The presence of Moors there has led to pubs, for example, called the Black Boy, and the club, the rugby club, being called
the Black Arabs.
The Black Arabs.
There you go. Now, on South Africa, now that Zuma is gone, who actually wins? Euroman, an activist, says, I think that Nelson Mandela did not have any successor to match his decency and integrity. #sad. And Graham Rayner says, from what I understand, not South Africa. The new guy is apparently no less corrupt.
Oh, he's definitely less corrupt. He's also fantastically rich. But as I said earlier, when I knew him, he was the leader of the country's mine workers and a militant in the ANC, a freedom fighter.
Yeah.
I'm hoping he will be again in the presidency.
I hope so too. And that's all the tweets we've got time for today.
Which, alas, means that's the end of the show.
But please stay in touch with us on social media, on Facebook, Sputnik on Russia Today, or on Twitter and Instagram, RT_Sputnik. It's goodbye from me, Gayatri.
And from me, George Galloway. Amanla.